So, what was Burnout 3 really meant to be? Today I'll be straying from my usual content to cover my theory that has recently gained traction called the Crash+Burn theory. Let me begin by saying this theory is not confirmed and all based on guesses and points or hints from earlier builds of the game. I know most of my content is fucking trash and quickly slapped together to meet deadlines, but this is something I put a lot of thought into, so if you please could show some support and listen close. Now, let's begin with where it all started, the official debut of Burnout 3, Crash+Burn. On April 3rd, the Crash+Burn trailer was released to the public but quickly revoked afterwards to avoid possible copyright with Eidos, since Crash and Burn was currently in development by Climax. Within the trailer, it features numerous clips of crashes made with the Sports Type 1 and Muscle Type 1, likely a video showcasing the sheer destruction, which at the time wasn't that great in the first place. What's most interesting to note is how instead of showing it off as a fast-paced arcade racer like the rest of the series, it seems to have a slightly eerie tone with a lack of any music, text, or anything to accompany the trailer and tell you all about what's coming to the game. The scream made from the tune Contact Upon being wailed isn't really that chilling upon first thought, but it only goes deeper. Crashes, not only being brutal, featuring deformation more realistic than any other version of the game, are also very harsh, but the thought of a dead driver when it comes to Burnout is never a thought that crosses your mind. For those who don't know, when a driver is knocked out or killed at the wheel, it is not uncommon for their head to rest against the steering wheel, blaring the horn consistently. Upon the final crash, the horn blares, which is meant to possibly signify the death of the driver as a grand finale for a trailer showing off some good crashes. It's still not much to intake, but it only gets worse. In late April, more trailers were pushed out every few days, starting with Barrels of Fun and ending with Over the Speed Limit. These trailers, similar to Crash+Burn, featured not only the most destructive and brutal crashes the series has seen to date, but also the first editions of Impact Time, which is where the picture starts to build. In the final game, Impact Time is mildly off for a racing game, but that's not even the most of it. The PS2 demo's Impact Time music is very eerie and does not sound anything like something you'd hear out of a Burnout game, and not to mention the unused Impact Time track from the final game. Have a listen and enjoy the view of some of my favorite crashes from the Burnout 3 pre-release screenshots. first 3 impact time tracks you heard were the PS2 demo, and the last one is in the final game but unused. The sounds, melodies, and ambience that plays in these makes them all the more horrifying, complete with screams, crushes, shatters, and every sound imaginable to remind you the true horror and thought behind car crashes, whether you've experienced one or not. While this can be argued that they're just supposed to be like that, a lot of these were redone for the final game to fit the lighter tone after EA became their publisher. These sounds were around before or not long after the debut of Crash+Burn, which is around April, before the game's EA makeover in May. Now going back to the shriek from the Yellow Tune compact in Crash+Burn, it's not actually a sound they added over it, believe it or not. Shrieks can be heard in the PS2 demo when you crash, when traffic is hit, or sometimes when AI crash. It's not common, but you definitely won't miss it the second time you hear it. Shrieks can also be heard from the player's vehicle in impact time, as sometimes when your car is scraping or pinging off things the effect will play, as to make it seem like the driver inside actually does something other than stare off into space and put his hands on a non-existent steering wheel. Here's the only documentation of this I've recorded on my computer, and all the other times I've experienced this were on PS2. Now, let's get back to the horn. As stated before, it's usually a sign of unconsciousness or death, but what does that mean for crash mode? Are all the blaring horns and distant sirens supposed to remind you of all the people you killed, destruction you caused, the chaos you bring with you? It's also worth noting that the downtown siren ambience can only be heard in crash mode as well, and having a close listen you might hear that it sounds like they're getting closer, almost as if they're responsible for cleaning up the disaster you've caused. I might just be thinking too deep on this, but there's many things that point to the game originally being a grim take on this series. Something else I'd like to point out is how knockouts were renamed to takedowns, likely to fit the changing tone of the game. When you think of a takedown, you think of a variety of things, from as minor as someone being brought down to someone being eliminated. Knockouts, on the other hand, have a more aggressive thought to them, and all of that comes to mind is something being brought down with extreme force. The lighting also became brighter, but that doesn't really mean anything. The last thing to keep in mind is the early names of the game, but in this video we'll only focus on 2. Besides Crash+Burn, which in itself sounds a bit sadistic, but also retaining a decently long name similar to its prequel Point of Impact, the one thing I'd like to focus on the most is the working title, Burnout 3, See You in Hell. It's completely out of this world at first thought, but it was an actual consideration for the game, which if you think about it, fits better with the darker tone seen in pre-release gameplay. Now, back into the first question. What was Burnout 3 really supposed to be? A game to scare people out of street racing by showing the destruction behind actual crashes? Hell no. Criterion would never do that, and they even wanted to do a campaign for people getting speeding tickets to receive a copy of Burnout 2, so in no way are they completely discouraging it. Was it meant to be a darker toned racing game with the likes of a horror movie? Maybe. To this day we'll never know until the devs themselves answer, so I guess the question will remain. If you made it this far, you're a fucking legend and I salute you. Thanks a bunch for sticking around, and until next time.